Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back another video from Annie News, some more cut content for the Eminence in Shadow, Season 2. And this is covering John Smith versus Shadow Garden. I love this. I love the whole John Smith thing and the randomness of it, and just having fun with it, and everything with the fake money and the confusion and that. Absolutely fantastic. When he actually fought three of them in the train as well, he's like, "Who are you?" And he's just John Smith. I was like, "This is awesome." So yeah, let's see what was left out.
A new arc means we get yet another fascinating CID persona. This time it's John Smith and his mission to sabotage Shadow
So cool. I love it. It's brilliant. Oh yeah, the other persona in season. Yeah.
Garden, but unlike how Mundane Man and Shadow were limited
Yeah, Mundane Man.
to certain archetypal characteristics, John Smith isn't limited by anything. Obviously he can't use his slime, but other than that he's free to do whatever he wants. It's the reason we see him use wires to
Absolutely brilliant. I love it.
fight here. So, aside from the whole economic credit crisis brewing in the background, it's John Smith and his ability to experiment with different fighting styles that really makes me hyped for what's to come from this part of the anime. All of which we'll talk about in greater detail in this episode of Cut Content.
Awesome.
Let's get started. Episodes 24 and 25, The Mask of Falsehood, covering chapters 4 to 6 from Volume 3 of the light novel. If we start things off here during the post-credit teaser from After the Blood Moon arc, this was a private meeting supposed to be taking place at the White Tower, the primary location Yukime tends to reside while in the Lawless City.
Yeah.
Shadow was Yukime's guest,
Ah, wow. Okay, cool.
and as thanks for having saved her during the fight with the Blood Queen, she had offered her two assistants Natsu and Kana to him. Shadow obviously wasn't there for any of that, so rather than indulge in the women or the wine, he simply requested to know what she wanted from him.
Oh wow. Okay, go ahead, lad.
A question to which Yukime responded by saying his trust. She was willing to offer anything and everything in order to gain it. Since the gifts she'd presented weren't quite good enough though, she instead offered Shadow information, specifically news on the creation of the Anti-Mitsugoshi Alliance. With every major corporation teaming up to go against Mitsugoshi,
Of course they are. Of course they are.
the ensuing war was sure to leave openings for them to strike, openings that the two were hoping to capitalize on. As for why Mitsugoshi was such a threat, well, with innovative products of the utmost quality, even if every merchant was to band together and compete against them, that still wouldn't be enough to gain back all the market share that they'd lost. There wasn't a coalition of merchants large enough that could ever even hope to stand against them. As for a coalition of companies, well, that would be slightly different. At first, they didn't see Mitsugoshi as such a threat, but after the monopolization of several industries, they'd finally banded together to create the MCA.
The MCA.
Garter had resolved all competition and brought everyone together under a single banner. That being the case, the group of bandits we see hijacking the carriage at the beginning of the episode was actually Garter's private army. A militia of privately contracted Dark Knights whose power was equivalent to that of a small nation.
Right. Okay.
It wasn't rare for Dark Knights to fall out of their order and turn
me,
to a
sorry.
life of crime, but for this many to join together and create their own army, well,
I'm full of cold. I'm sorry.
that was something that almost never happened.
Ah, the clover.
It just went to show how much money and influence the MCA had. The rest of the hijacking was pretty much the same, so now we can get to Sid's first appearance as John Smith.
I love it.
A funny thing to note about his outfit is that it's actually a Mitsugoshi knockoff created by Yukime's Snowfox Corporation, a
Oh.
legitimate business operating outside the Lawless City whose sole purpose is to rip off and sell Mitsugoshi products. They're actually the leading authority on plagiarizing
Oh,
them.
that's great.
That doesn't mean they've been able to replicate everything though, since a lot of Mitsugoshi's products are just too technologically advanced for them. The level of engineering coming from Ida is just way too superior. That said, if a company like Mitsugoshi was to operate in the real world, their dominant takeover of the market would certainly violate antitrust laws.
Right.
For those who don't know what that is, these are rules set in place to help encourage competition.
Yeah, you can't have one just completely dominate everything. You've got to have competition existing.
They're regulations that ensure no single entity can establish a monopoly. Clearly, Mitsugoshi has done just that, so it only makes sense that something like the MCA would form because of it. Now, where Sid goes to meet Yukime for all their other meetings is a private residence located deep within the forest.
That looks rather nice.
About 30 minutes away from where Cid goes to school, there's a hidden mansion nestled neatly between the forest, a waterfall, and a mountain stream.
Okay, lovely.
It's this serene location that makes for a very aesthetic hideout, one in which the two can plan things together. Yukime typically tends to start things off by trying to seduce Cid, but
Of course, everyone wants a piece.
after getting denied, it's always business. So there was all that stuff about Mitsugoshi and the MCA, but what wasn't included was a visual representation of why Yukime wants to be the one to kill Getten. She doesn't tell him about her past just yet, but she does remove her robe and show Cid
All the scars on her back. Damn.
scars on her back. It was this inflamed mess that was solely because of Getten. For a bit more context on how this happened, well, it was apparently from back when she was a child. Back before she had matured into the nine-tailed fox that she is today, her and her mother lived this simple, happy life in a remote spirit fox village.
Okay.
Since her mother was one of the stronger three-tailed foxes, it was only natural that she make her living by hunting.
Cool.
It was one of those days that she was out hunting, though, that something would happen which she refused to elaborate on. Something I'm sure we'll find out more in the next episode, but for the time being, that's all we know so far.
Okay, cool.
Fast forward to Cid's self-proclaimed NPC shopping event, and that's when we get to our first introduction with the paper money.
Paper money.
Unlike
yeah.
how it is with our society, though, these paper bills here are nothing more than vouchers for real money. Since the Kingdom of Midgar is primarily a coin-based economy, there are still many stores and merchants who don't trust this paper money, resulting in a society in which it's considered common courtesy to ask for permission before using said paper money.
Ah, right, so you meant to go in and go, hey, are you okay if I pay with this kind of thing? Kind of same as walking into somewhere and going, hey, do you take card? Or is it just cash? Like,
At first, Mitsugoshi was the only place anyone could use paper money, but after offering free gifts and discounts to those who did, the amount in circulation quickly grew to the point it was common to find it everywhere. It was an aspect of knowledge Cid had given the girls when they were younger. Once his
always the way.
recollection
I
of
love
that
it.
information started to get a bit shady, though, Cid had simply told them to figure out the rest themselves.
I love it. I love it. It's like he tells them. It always goes back to when they were younger and stuff that Cid told them. Brilliant.
He had left them with what's essentially an incomplete understanding of financial systems. Regardless, the introduction of their own currency was enough to get the MCA to do the same. If they didn't, then Mitsugoshi would have established yet another monopoly over one of the most powerful markets in the world. The key question the MCA needs to ask themselves then is, how well do they understand just how dangerous money creation can be? If they don't, then anyone can step in and create a credit crisis.
Yes.
The core topic of this third meeting here with Yukime. Cid does well to explain the concept of credit creation, but what Yukime means when she refers to a run on the bank is the idea of everyone with paper money rushing to exchange it back into coins. Since the banks had given out more bills than they have cash on hand, the immediate influx of people wanting to get their money back would make it so the bank couldn't cover the amount that people were asking for.
Yeah, they'd just run out. There'd be nothing.
It would effectively make all that paper money worthless and as a result send the bank straight into bankruptcy. It was as Yukime was explaining all of this that Cid would have his first certifiable AINZ moment. He would come out of this conversation with the best plan possible, all while looking like he himself was the one who had come up with it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, AINZ, because AINZ always kind of like accidentally, like, you know, it's always Demiurge, isn't it? And then AINZ pretends that he's like, yeah, that was what I was talking about the whole time. Yeah.
It was a hilarious moment that reminded me of Demiurge and AINZ.
There you go. Yeah.
Part of the reason Yukime believed that Cid was testing her here was because the
I know,
insane
I know,
aura
I
Cid was
understand.
emanating made it seem like Cid had enshrouded himself with magic. When Yukime realized that this was actually just his willpower incarnate, she quickly understood that he was testing her. His oppressive presence clearly made it seem like she was missing something. Now, since the main concern of making counterfeits was getting caught, the whole mission was pretty much this race with the MCA. Cid and Yukime had to send them to bankruptcy before they could be found by them. That being the case, if they were to run the operation from the lawless city, then that combined with John Smith actively thwarting investigations would surely give the two enough time to win that race. It was an idea that left both Cid and Yukime with a good idea of what needed to be done now. So, with their parts now set in this genius plan, a core component for Cid was making sure that Alpha didn't find out. You see,
Yeah, of course.
if she or any of the others found out what his role was in all this, then everything he's doing to rebuild Mitsugoshi would be for nothing. Luckily for Cid, that just meant that he couldn't use his sword anymore. Since that was obviously a core part of his shadow aesthetic, All he needed to do instead was just implement other fighting styles.
The whole wires thing I thought was pretty cool.
Something that he was eagerly looking forward to. The next scenes with Delta were pretty much the same, but when it came to the hunting of bandits down in the sewers, it was actually deep in the forest far away from the city.
Alright, we got more on Delta as well and learned about like her family and how that all works. And where the guy's like, I'm your brother, and they're just like, you're too weak. Just kills him with a tail. It's like, that's cool.
And this was the one thing Cid knew that he'd never have to worry about with Delta. The way she concealed her presence was the best out of anyone, and her ability to sense prey was even better than his own.
She's brilliant.
It didn't matter how much he tried to boost his senses with magic, the difference between him as a human and her as a therianthrope was simply too much for any amount of magic to overcome. With the exception of Delta's intellect, she truly was the physically strongest out of anyone. So, with her acting as this makeshift
That was awesome in season 1. She just constantly kept killing them over and over.
radar, she would lead the hunt as they ran through the forest and eliminate what was essentially the hardest and most time-consuming part. The good part was obviously the hunt itself, but the instant any prey were spotted, they would already be killed by the time Cid could get there. Waiting just wasn't something Delta was capable of. It's not that she wouldn't if she was ordered to, but in the rare instances where that does happen, the actual act of waiting is known to cause her stress. So much so that the moment Cid's not around to watch her anymore, she would usually go Mount Gamma, chop down a forest, or eat all the vegetables in a random farm somewhere.
Oh, okay.
So, if that was how Delta acted back when she was a child, Cid definitely didn't want to see how she relieved her stress now. It's the reason he didn't tell her to wait here at all. When she stopped for a random grunt calling her name, the fact that she did was all the more surprising to Cid. It was as if the impossible was just made possible somehow. When that grunt revealed himself to be her brother, there was actually a few tidbits of information that the anime didn't include here.
Oh, okay, go on. This is going to be cool. Because it literally, we got nothing in the anime.
The first was that Delta could have been chief if she wasn't a woman. The second was that Getten was so strong that even their dad couldn't beat him. And the third was that Getten was the strongest swordsman of all the wolf clans.
Right.
The interaction then ended with decapitation, and Cid's only thoughts were of how therianthropes were true to their might makes right motto.
Alright, I kind of like the tail going straight through. I thought I was boss that.
As a species in which at least 80% believed that, the strong were made kings and those good at hunting respected. All because strength was pretty much the only thing that they had going for them. Their physical capabilities were outstanding, their senses sharp and reflexes great, then their magic was exceptional and their lives lengthy. If it wasn't for their lack of intelligence, Cid truly believed that therianthropes could have taken over the world by now. You see, it's because of that same might makes right philosophy that these beastfolk were incapable of ever conquering outside their forests. Every time their population went up to the point that they could, another case of infighting would bring their population down again.
Right.
Sure, there was the occasional hero who would unite all the tribes and lead them on this grand expedition, but every instance of that has led to them always being pushed back somehow. This wasn't because they were losing the fights, but was rather because they would always stretch themselves far too thin.
God, I want Sugar Tensei to come back.
Every battle was always this absolute victory, but because the strong never wanted to stop, they would always extend beyond the reach of their supply lines, then eventually retreat back home after getting hungry enough. So, setting aside the few exceptions such as Yukime's spirit foxes, the beastfolk were a rather predictable species who truly follow their might makes right instincts. Now, with regards to who Zabra was, aside from being Delta's brother, he was also the newest member of Getten's top 4 soldiers, the Clovers as he personally likes to refer to them as.
Yeah.
The news was quite the shock for Getten, but what was more of a shock was the little progress they were making towards hindering the Mitsugoshi group.
We're not doing anything.
They did manage to prevent all traveling salesmen from carrying Mitsugoshi products or currency anymore, but that rural market was a much smaller scale than that of the urban one. Even if Mitsugoshi was trying to break out into the countryside, cutting them off there had little to no effect on their overall revenue. The foundation they'd built in the capital was just too strong here. So much so that Getten knew that he'd have to try more forceful measures. So, when we get to the invasion with the other 3 Clovers, it wasn't Kai and Omega who had gone to support Gamma, but instead just New, since she alone was more than enough. The fight itself was pretty much perfect.
She's so stupid.
But what I will say is that Gamma loved to make up excuses. Every time she tripped, she would just comment on how good Clover 1 was at capitalizing on her openings. Niu would then eventually cut off his exit, so when faced with the choice of fighting Niu or running past Gamma, Clover 1 knew the only logical option was Gamma. At the very least, everything about her was predictable. The fight would end pretty much the same way that we saw, except rather than Gamma's sword exploding on impact, it had actually just cut him in half right down the middle.
Oh, right.
Both him and his partner's deaths were a lot more gruesome.
Oh, God.
Now, a quick
Cool.
thing to note about why this defeat was such a blow to the MCA was because, in addition to the Clovers being sent to kidnap and steal, there was also a rear guard unit who was supposed to report in case the mission failed. Since neither them nor the Clovers returned, that meant that Mitsugoshi's power spread farther than they could have ever imagined.
Oh my God. Of course it has.
When we get to the next scene with Alexia, this was merely something that she had forced Cid to come to. She had literally dragged him
The way she does knocks the sword out and then he's like... It's great. And he just doesn't care. Ask me why.
from school straight to the dojo. Also that she could showcase her newfound skills over the fundamentals. Cid wasn't really planning to pay attention, but after just one glance there was this noticeable difference with her. The swordplay he'd initially been quite fond of had significantly improved to the point that it shocked even him. Fast forward to Cid's next meeting with Yukime, and you may recognize this location as the underground facility where Claire had once been kidnapped.
Ah, yeah.
Since it was a nice hidden location between the capital and the lawless city, Cid knew it would make the perfect base for their operations. To him, it
Sweet.
was the very image of an ideal secret base. So, with the counterfeits being made here, it was upon Cid's initial inspection that he couldn't see anything. That's not to say that he made up the differences though, because in order to see them he had actually refined his senses. By enhancing his vision to crazy levels, he was finally able to see the inconsistencies with the quality, ink, and printing. It wasn't just stuff he made up that happened to be true. Of course, the notion he did makes it a lot more funny, but either way is still fitting to Cid as a character. Now, the reason Cid knew that someone would be trailing this train specifically was because he was pulling a Batman and watching the city from atop the clock tower.
Amazing. He's just waiting for it.
It was then that he noticed three figures trailing a carriage and as such immediately jumped down to intercept them. As for how Shadow Garden knew to investigate this train, Gamma had narrowed down the list of suspicious trade routes to this one. The reason Rose's squad was the one chosen to handle it was because her impressive initiative combined with incredible displays of strength had made her team become regarded as pretty strong. It was becoming increasingly often that they were chosen for a lot of the more dangerous missions.
Well, of course, for plot as well, we need to see her more.
This mission would prove to be even more difficult because the opponent known as John Smith was far superior to any of them. A few seconds was all it took for all of them to realize that. He wasn't so much an opponent that they couldn't keep up with, but the hard-to-see wires that moved unpredictably made approaching him near impossible.
I love it.
Somehow, despite only having 10 fingers, the number of wires he was controlling far surpassed that.
So cool.
He had effectively crafted a web in which not a single angle was left open. It wasn't this phenomenal feat of control that was the most worrying though, since his ability to manipulate space was even more terrifying. I mean, sure, managing dozens of wires while predicting their movements was amazing,
Yeah,
but
in that
what truly set John above the
room-
rest was the way that he took advantage of that. It was clear John Smith's understanding of the battlefield was more superior than anyone's. It didn't seem to matter how strong, fast, or skilled he was, because the way John fought made it look like he was already 10 steps ahead of everyone. It was as if he was watching the battlefield from above, taking in
Wow.
exactly how the fight was progressing, then easily predicting what his opponents were going to do next. So, as retreat became this increasingly attractive option, the brief pause 664 took to decide led John to go on the offensive himself. You see, up until now the girls were staying out of his range. They had a pretty good idea of where all the wires were, but they definitely weren't skilled enough to navigate their way through them.
Yes, they've got masks on as well. Okay.
It was much safer to maintain distance and come up with another plan. It was as they did, though, that another set of invisible wires would restrain all their necks. What none of the girls had realized was that all the wires they'd seen were simply the ones John Smith was letting them see. There were countless more of different lengths and varying thickness,
Cool.
all filled with magic and ready to snap their necks with a single tug. Since that one wire was the only one restraining them, though, Rose knew the only option out was to charge John faster than he could move his finger, an all-out attack centered around her speed. If not for the hidden wires wrapped around all her other limbs, then this actually would have been the best chance Rose would have had at winning this fight. It was a choice we know Cid would have made as well. So, with that signifying their total and utter defeat, John Smith would simply release them. He didn't toss them out the window like how it was in the anime,
I thought that was quite brutal, but like, yeah.
but instead just let them go and left them with a warning. He told them not to get involved and that was it. A scene that I would argue is one of Cid's most disrespectful, since in the end he doesn't even see the need to fight them anymore.
Wow.
He had defeated them in such a one-sided manner that even their will to fight was crushed as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it for those 2 episodes. John Smith has made his move on Shadow Garden, and I'm excited to see how Shadow Garden will respond to it.
Yeah.
Until then though, I hope this video was something that you enjoyed in the meantime.
Heck yeah.
If it was, then feel free to leave a like and comment.
Cool.
But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time.
Ciao. Cool. Interesting. It's interesting how they wear the masks as well, but in the anime they just like kind of try and cover their faces with the hoods and there are little differences. Yeah, not even on the train, they're outside. When the fight, different location swaps when Cid's talking to the Ninetales woman originally. Awesome, cool. Nice to see the changes, nice to see what's left out, blah, blah, blah. I'm really enjoying season 2. It's absolutely awesome. John Smith. It's class. I forgot about Mr. Mundane, man. But, yeah, so, yeah. Anyway, check out my Etsy shop. Links in the description. Go buy my t-shirt. I love it. It's awesome. Helps support the channel. And thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, link is in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month for Zaya Sport Channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for that. Thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe, and leave comments below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. I'll see you guys all next time.